Right. No introductions to begin with. I'm going to set the stage with some of our ideas about this topic, why multiculturalism can't work. I'm going to basically, so this is how I see it. Multiculturalism is veiled liberalism. Okay, so it's this idea that if you just have loads of choice, somehow you'll choose the right things. But actually, all it turns out is you just get loads of choice about materialistic things like food and fashion. Um, but if you leave people to their own random choice, I mean, of course they should have the freedom to choose, but if you don't give any guidance, people just degenerate into downhill kind of behavior. Um, and that's what you get with anything like capitalism. You let anybody do what they want, they'll just go for pornography and whatever. And I have linked this topic to nationalism because that's on the rise in Europe. And that has got some value, I'll briefly say. It gives some people purpose and direction, kind of, but unfortunately it's very negative in Europe. It's all about being against something, like being against Islam, and that's very empty. And I think that will, in the long term, it will make people happy for a minute, and then they'll get depressed because they realize it's very empty just to be against stuff. So that was why maybe too long. Anyway, let's go round in terms of ideas. Zarina, you're the one who inspired me to pick this topic in the first place because you did a video on it. So just as brief as you can. It's hard to be brief, but share some thoughts about it, Zarina, and then we'll introduce you on the second round.
Well, it's funny because about, I think it was a month and a half ago or so, I scripted a full video called The Problem with Multiculturalism based on that short I did. And it's still sitting on my computer, but I haven't uploaded it yet. So I suppose this video might almost replace it. But yeah, I think a lot of people don't really understand the problem with multiculturalism. And it's really what you were saying about how with multiculturalism, what you really end up with is instead of having a homogenous, unified culture, you end up with a whole bunch of cultures all mixed together. And what happens is there's no dominant culture. And that's where we end up with all these different political parties, different ways of thinking. Because on the one hand, yes, of course, we all support freedom of speech, but what's the point of having freedom of speech if nobody can decide on a way to govern a society? And it's quite strange because humans by nature, what we are, we're tribal. We like to be within, we function within our tribes. And if there's no tribe, then there isn't really any shared value. So what I really want to emphasize, because I think a lot of people think of nationalism, they think, oh, so what? That means only white people should live together or black people live together. I want to emphasize this more on culture rather than on, say, skin color. I want to say this isn't so much about regarding how I would interpret nationalism. It's not so much saying only white people or only brown people should live together. It's that we should have one shared unified culture. So I think that's really what's going to save the West. If every country had its own culture, because really as well, like there's countries which are, quite peaceful. I mean, like, Khaled obviously lives in Jordan, and
Jordan, yeah.
you have a shared culture, but you still have people who are, say, of other, skin tones or ethnic groups living together, but
Different
they adhere.
religions, yeah.
Exactly, but they adhere to the main dominant culture. So that's what's really important. It's about every country to survive needs to have one main dominant unified culture and somebody who embodies those values. That's how you maintain society. Because otherwise, yeah, if we have everything mixed up, then we end up with cultures collapsing effectively.
Cool. And Claire, you've been talking about this in so many different ways for a very long time. Can you say in a few words what you think?
I'm going to be a little bit different this time and talk about multiculturalism as something that is inevitable for any empire, because all empires are by definition consists of different cultures because they consist of different subject peoples. A conquering imperial army has conquered all these different, kingdoms and nations and peoples, and therefore empire is by definition multicultural. And I don't think the indigenous white Westerner understands that it is just the nature of empire to have you know, to have the empire saying, well, we're all one big family now, these Indians, these Pakistanis, these, you know, whoever, and therefore we should live together harmoniously. So I don't think it is so much a problem of race or culture, but of perceived fairness. And I see this as the white indigenous people saying, "Oh, well, what about us? Aren't you supposed to care about us, government? You know, well, why are you letting all these people in? You know, you say we're a democracy. You never consulted us, and if you vote the way you don't like us to vote, we're certainly Nazi, fascist, racist, and who should be ignored." And it is this dishonesty and this injustice that rankles, and this has never been addressed.
Cool. Okay. So I'm glad. Very interesting comments. I'm not sure why Paul Williams, who's a famous Muslim, I would just say a convert Muslim. I won't say much more than that, I suppose. Scared of Claire, but other than that, I'm really. I invited Jay to come and speak, but maybe you can't actually speak, but you can comment on the side. So I'm glad he's there as well to give his alternative perspective. I was basically trying to invite what Claire describes as white nationalists, which is interesting. I think
Tommy
like
Robinson supporters.
oh, I see. Okay, so yeah, I suppose yeah. So and as Zarina was saying, you don't really have to be white to be in. You know, nationalism isn't just a race thing. But anyway, but
Well, the thing
very
is that, you know, the
yeah.
non-white people are muscling in on white nationalism because they can't stand it anymore. You know, it's like,
Oh,
you know, it's like,
they've had enough of white people taking over nationalism or
no, it's
something.
like, can you do it better? Can you do your white nationalism better?
Yeah, I'm
Because
gonna try to do it better as well. I'm taking over, Jay. I'm gonna forget your kind of nationalism. Anyway, so let's do our quick intros as well now that hopefully people are interested. Um, I'm a Muslim who teaches happiness ideas to non-Muslims, and the reason why I say it like that, even though you know Muslims are also welcome to listen, is that I want people to realize that you don't have to believe what I believe, just believe it. I'm hopefully going to offer ideas based on psychology and reality, like just look at the statistics, for example, that kind of thing, to say these ideas work. And I'm not even being tribal about it. It's like, you know what? I hope you adopt some of them for your own benefit without even becoming a Muslim. I would recommend becoming a Muslim because it's like the whole package. But if I always go by this old you can call it Old Testament biblical Torah stroke Muslim idea. If you can save the life of one person, you can say it's like saving all of humanity. That's the God perspective, which is basically if I can help one person, that's fantastic. That's all I care about. So that's my little intro. I think I've said enough. So Zarina, any intro you want to give yourself?
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Zarina Macha, aka the Rational Female, and I am a prophet of the Mother Goddess Bastet, and I'm here as a servant of God.
Cool. All right. What was you say? Did you say you're a prophet of what?
Of the Mother Goddess Bastet.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool.
And this is whom I defer to.
Cool. Claire, your intro. Oh, you're muted. Oh,
yes,
yeah.
yes. I'm sorry about that. Well, my intro is that I'm promoting Sharia for non-Muslims. I think Westerners have run out of options, having replaced Christianity with liberalism, and then tried last century to replace liberalism with socialism and nationalism and communism, and they've all failed. So, having tried all the wrong ways already, they should adopt this middle way of secular Quranism because it's not quite Islam, but also not liberal democracy, which has already failed.
Cool. Now, since Jay says he's only around for 30 minutes because he has to go to work, yeah. Yeah, I try to get non-religious people and whatever, all kind of people. I'm just kind of responding to this comment. I tried to get people of different opinions. In fact, I had some ideas of people who might really disagree with me and do it really well, which I always look forward to. Like, the best opposition possible. Yeah, that's one thing. But since Jay's about to go, I want to respond to this idea about, so just for people who don't know what's kind of happening on the sort of let's call it the national front. I don't want to sound like a political. Basically, in Europe, there's a lot of move towards nationalism. Maybe I'm not completely in touch with everything, but I was very interested that a person called Geert Wilder, who's in charge of a national party in Holland, has become the most popular party in the country. And he's famous for being Islamophobic. And I think I'm going to be doing talks specifically why people don't like Muslims and stuff like that, and I'm inviting different people to it. But I think that's an interesting angle. There's kind of two sides, like, does multiculturalism work, and look at the opposite, why people going towards nationalism, and what is nationalism in Europe at the moment, because I'm focused on the West, and how Western people think. So I want to briefly say, because it was gonna, I'll very briefly say this in response to Jay's comments, like, what's wrong with being against Islam? Sure, be against us whatever you want. That's my opinion, right? Like, you can be against anything you want to your own benefit or your own detriment as well, right? That's how the world works. You got a choice to do what you want. But I was going to say, and maybe I'll quickly put it on the screen. So I always put like a summary of my ideas and references and stuff in a document, and I pretty much always put it in the description, if not in the comments, right? And I was going to say very briefly, so there's a quote from the Quran. I'll read it. I'm not sure. It's like poetry, kind of have to reflect on it. And I'll kind of point out why especially you need Islam, and Islam is the only solution to this. Maybe it's a bit small. You're looking closely, so let me zoom in.
Oh,
or
I'm
something.
on my phone as well, so it's going to be small.
Yeah, I know. I realized that. Yeah. Just thinking, can max it out. That's it. But I don't want. Oh. Anyway, people, you can watch it back afterwards, isn't it? But I'll read it out. Yeah. And Jay said he likes this format where I show stuff on the screen, so it's easy to refer to stuff. Okay, and hold fast all together by the rope of Allah, and be not divided, and remember the favor of Allah which he bestowed on you when you were enemies, and he united your hearts in love, so that by his grace you became as brothers, and you were on the brink of a pit of fire, and he saved you from it. Thus does Allah explain to you his commandments, that you may be guided. So it always explains things in his kind of, I think, subconscious way. It talks to your subconscious. What is this rope of Allah that you hang on to and stuff like that? I'll very briefly say what I feel from this. It's kind of like, it's a thing that we can all attach to, one higher cause that we can attach to. And where's this kind of rope coming from? If you imagine it, it's coming from a higher place, of a higher intelligence, from a more caring, the God who created all of us, right? So it's kind of I think in English we say a leg up, and this is a rope up, right? So, and what does it lead to? It leads to connection, and this is just God explaining, like, this is why I'm trying to guide you for your own benefit, so you feel together. And before that, you were all falling apart. So, in brief, my 3 points that I gain from this, but I'll go into them more detail. This idea of multiculturalism, okay. And also why you need Islam, is that choice does not lead to good by itself. Okay, in fact, it tends to lead to fire, and fire doesn't mean just hell in the next life. It means hell in this life. So we tend to make stupid choices. We degenerate if we're led to be, like I would describe as, spoiled children who are given no guidance. And then the second point is, only religion works because it comes from a higher intelligence, not our stupid individualistic ideas that are based on current whatever is popular at the moment. And then only religion unites as well. It's like, who's telling us like what to do. There's, first of all, you can't police kindness and love and stuff like that. Only really God, the all-seeing, all-powerful, can do that. But also, God's got all of our interests in mind, because God is really, if anything, maybe it sounds weird, but our parent. You know, it's like, that's where we come from. That's our real parent. We've got physical parents that we were procreated by, like through mechanism of God, but God really created us. So those are my reasons why you really need Islam in particular, religion generally. Yeah, so that's what's wrong with being against Islam. It's not good for you, but you can if you want. So that's my idea. So I'll stop. I'll unhide that. I'm sorry that I hog things, but. And Jay, I'm going to be looking out for your responses. Let's keep going around in circles. Zarina, go for it. Say whatever you
So
want to
if I
say.
may, I think that a lot of people have many misconceptions about Islam, including myself. And correct me if I'm wrong, Khaled, but I believe that the Quran is not supposed to be read as a literal. It's not supposed to be read literally. It's, as you said, it's supposed to be read metaphorically, like a form of poetry. Because you see, when you read that quote, I really felt the beauty in that quote come through, because you're absolutely right. It's like, even though I don't identify as a Muslim, I completely do resonate with that frequency of saying that, yes, this is talking about how the essence of God effectively saves us from that sense of, damning hellfire. Because what is God? For me, I describe myself as a pantheist. For me, God is really everything. As you said, the all-seeing, the all-powerful, this all-powerful benevolent force. And I think that people become Islamophobic because, unfortunately, the very mainstream it's very insulting, version of Islam that is currently going through right now is a version of Islam that is very, very negative. And I would say the reason why is because what they are doing is they are following a literal version of the Quran. And that's what is meant by Islamic fundamentalism. And on my channel, because I've been quite polite overall, I've never really said that, oh, I think Islam is pure evil. I actually do think that Islam, as with any other religion, has its very, very positive side and it has its very negative side. And, as you know, for example, one of the things which I talk about is, I'm against this whole thing of telling women to have to cover themselves. And I remember you were saying how the Queen of Jordan is a Muslim, and I was looking her up, and it's like she doesn't wear a hijab. She doesn't, she wears very nice, normal clothing. So with the Quran, when it's read as a form of poetry, when it's read and actually interpreted correctly, obviously, with someone like Khaled's guidance or whatever, that can actually help people find the path to salvation. And that goes for, I'd say, all of the religions, really. Probably the Bible is the same. And I remember actually at Speaker's Corner, randomly one day a man just came up to me and said, yeah, these books, they're not supposed to be read literally. They're supposed to be read metaphorically. They're supposed to, they contain symbolism. And that's where we find the meaning. So I think that the reason why a lot of Westerners have these misconceptions about Islam is because, and not just with Islam, but with religion in general, is because these religions have almost been selling a very, very corrupted and very dangerous version of religion. Because religion gone wrong is, yes, dogmatic, forceful, dangerous, negative. And that's unfortunately what we're seeing right now in the modern West with Wahhabism, this very, very dangerous, very, very cultish version of religion. And that is really what I and many others have been speaking up upon, because the fear is that if this version of Islam dominates, it will wipe out all of the other religions. Whereas if the beautiful side of Islam, and if we say really the almost substitute Islam for connecting to God, what we all must really be doing is trying to connect to God. And that can only really be achieved through religion. And because there isn't really any positive religious guidance right now in the West, we've got all this new age bullshit. We don't really have a good, strong, how shall I say, way for people to properly connect to God. And, trying to connect to God yourself is really, really very, very difficult. So regarding following in the guidance of, the old deities, of the old, the ones who bestow this wisdom upon us all, I think that ultimately what they wanted was for us to follow these religions to properly serve and live in concordance with the divine, rather than just go around destroying the world and destroying people's cultures and people's faiths. And yeah, that is really not the way.
So, I'll come back to Oryx, which is your cousin, really. I mean, not your cousin, sorry, your uncle, saying the wrong word,
Yeah.
in a bit. But because Jay is only here for a little bit, I'll focus on him and then we'll backtrack to some of the earlier comments. So one seems to be, since it's Claire's turn, we're trying to go round in a circle clockwise. One comment targeted towards you. Let's start, and then the next one's for me. Yeah, go for it, Claire.
Yes. Well,
You can say anything besides answering that. Yeah, sorry.
I really wanted to say the point to ask you if you, when you were talking about the robe of Allah, you meant the Quran, didn't you? Did you mean the Quran?
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, it's a little bit vague, but the Quran is, because that's how God guides people. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because God is not literally a rope, so so you kind of have to go, what does that mean? That's a good question. Like, is it the Quran? Is it the behavior of Prophet Muhammad? Those kind of things. Yeah.
Yes,
God's
because
guidance.
I remember I once saw children going out on a school trip, very, very small children, and they were made to hold a rope so they didn't get lost or stray away. And that was the memory that was brought back to me when you mentioned the robe of Allah. And I think that the whole idea is that in the rules of the Quran, there will be justice, because you will get no peace without justice. And that, I think, is also an important point. And obviously, a lot of non-Muslims feel that Muslims have taken over their country, and they don't think it's fair because they were never asked. And when they complain, they are called names. And and I think if you did believe in God, as the Jews are supposed to, I mean, they're actually supposed to thank God for suffering, because they're supposed to think of every incident of suffering as an opportunity for learning. And this makes me think of, cognitive behavioral therapy. You interpret a particular incident in a different way, and you will have different thoughts and different behaviors and different reactions. And if only people would think, well, we are being made to suffer to make us learn something. But unfortunately, many of these Islamophobes refuse to learn. And that is also their problem, their atheism of, oh, look at these Muslims, how are they better than us? We have managed to stamp on them all this time. Christianity is the best, and if Christianity has failed, then no other religion is better, and we might as well just wait to die. I think that is fundamentally their nihilistic attitude. So,
Yeah, I was actually clicking on the wrong one, wrong J comment. The one earlier I clicked on was for me, but this one's for you particularly. Claire's, just in case you're on a phone or something, you can't see. Claire's middle of the road solution is doomed because middle of the road is basically liberalism. Claire should be honest with what she really wants and thinks. And
I do say that secular Quranism is a middle way between their kind of Sharia and what we have now, globo homo under liberal democracy. So I make no bones about being the middle road, and it would be more liberal than their kind of Sharia. But before I finish,
you know what? I'm laughing, but you should try for for people who don't know what global homo means or what Sharia means, just to make it more easily understood. Could you explain those terms as you go along when you're saying them, please?
well, Sharia is basically what Islamophobes think of, cutting hands off, 100 lashes for sexual offences, adultery, that the harsh bits of Islam that they have heard about and don't want, stoning, even though the Quran never actually mentions stoning. And I think these Islamophobes need to stoke up their Islamophobia by believing in these lies, even though they have been told, the correct interpretation and all that sort of thing. But I have just two more points, because one of them relates to what Zarina said about the literal interpretation of the Quran, I just wanted to mention that secular Quranism takes a literal but permissive approach, because I think we should take a literal approach, because you know it actually works. I mean, in the literal terms, in a way that I
When you're
interpret
taking
it.
a literal approach, that's where you end up with people going around putting guns to people's heads and slaying polytheists and slaying idol worshippers. So that's the part which I find extremely
This
concerning.
is only
I
in
suppose that's
battle
go on.
conditions.
Go on. You explain. Go on.
This is only
Claire.
in battle conditions. Those are
Yeah.
battle orders, and that verse in chapter 9 was talking about these Muslims in Muhammadan times fighting the polytheists, the Meccans who wanted to throw them out and suppress their ideas, and arguably those verses could be said to be confined in time and space. But yes, Islamophobes like quoting that to pretend that their Muslim neighbor will, cut off their fingers and, cut at their throats the moment, the law breaks down. And actually, there are verses in the Quran that actually says, "Please, Muslims, fight and leave Mecca. You need to do something to show you believe." And it was clear that a lot of the Meccans were saying, "No, we'd rather stay in Mecca and not, migrate to Medina with you, because it sounds like a bit difficult." So, that you have to, give of your life and your property in order to show that you believe, and you will go to heaven if you, do these things. So you can infer from these verses that a lot of these Meccans weren't interested in following Muhammad, and had to be persuaded by these, verses, encouraging jihad, and for them to follow Muhammad. But I'm happy to understand, explain it in another time. The why it is necessary for you to interpret literally, so you don't interpret entire verses away, but you can nuance it by something, and particularly the wife beating verse, which I think I have successfully interpreted in a way that gives justice to both sides.
I'm not
But
sure how it
that's
can be
probably a subject
justified.
of another stream.
I'm not sure how beating somebody's wife can possibly be justified.
Yes, but maybe we can talk about it together in another
In the
stream.
why people hate Muslims kind of thing, where we go specifically through that. But go on. Have you finished that? And then I'm
Finally, what
yeah.
I wanted to say about to address Jay's point about, because he will say, "By your fruits shall we know them," and and we know Muslims come from shithole countries, and we know Muslims are terrorists, and that sort of line that he takes. And I'm saying there is a difference between theory and practice, and Zarina, as a musician, will know that a lot of music exams are about theory and practice. You can pass your theory, but entirely fail your practical when you hit all the wrong notes, and the song, the tune is rubbish when you play it. So obviously there is an enormous chasm between Islam properly followed and from and exercised, implemented by people who don't care to follow it and who only cherry pick the verses that they like. And unfortunately, Muslims have been doing exactly that, and that was why the caliphates have all crashed and burnt. They have themselves misinterpreted their own rules. And I finished.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm not being super professional and writing down notes on what everybody's saying. So just the things that highlights that I vaguely remember, or something that Claire's repeated or something. So first thing was Queen Rania Jordan doesn't wear a headscarf. Doesn't mean that she's practicing all of Islam, but it does mean that Islam is not the kind of religion that will say you're terrible, and then you're going to hell or something for not wearing a headscarf. It's a very relaxed religion in many ways. It just tells you what you should do, but what you do is up to you for your own benefit, always. So that's one idea. And then the other thing about, and I'm gonna come to Jay's very important comments as well. This idea of do you interpret things literally or metaphorically? So you kind of have to have a sort of balance of the whole Quran. So first of all, sounds like a silly question, but this kind of helps explain things, right? Is God literally a rope? Most people immediately realize God is not a rope. Okay, so that means you have to do it, understand it metaphorically, and not only that. There's other verses of the Quran says that like God is like you cannot even imagine what God is. So there goes out the idea that God is a rope. It's a silly thing, silly example, but it's not that difficult where some things are literal rules, but sometimes some rules seem difficult, partly because they've been poorly translated, like the hit your wife thing, right? So I don't know if I want to go into it right now, but I will since it's brought up very briefly. It's kind of like that particular verse is like, do these millions of things, which basically makes it impossible to get to the last stage where you beat your wife. And the beat your wife is like you can't even leave a mark. It's ridiculous, like kind of beating, right? And there's a million things that will put men off doing that. Like you don't have sex with your wife until you kind of cover this argument. Most men will be like, okay, forget it. Just I want to, you know what I mean? They'll give up straight away. So that's kind of those kind of things need to be explained, and hopefully we're going to do a video based on just all the complaints against Islam. And I watched an interesting video that you had with Zarina had with a bunch of Christians who kind of jumped on you, as it were, in the British Library or something. And
Yeah,
you're
they
just
called Andrew
there, and
Tate
there's
a Satanist, which I found extremely insulting.
what was that about Andrew Tate?
They called Andrew Tate, they said Andrew Tate serves Satan, which I found extremely insulting on many levels.
They're kind of like these weird Christian extremists from Speaker's Corner who
They're good
just.
people. I just think they're a bit
But in turn, they call everybody Satan. Anything that's not Christian is Satanist. But I don't think all Christians are like that. But anyway, and there's some really nice ones. We're going to bring a common friend of all of ours, I think, kind of Marisha, who also says. And she said it to me all the time. You're a Satanist. Everybody said, but she's really nice at the same time. So, like he said, everything outside her understanding Christian, even Catholicism is Satanism. But anyway, I don't want to go into that too much, right? Okay, let's just jump into some interesting. I'm going to even answer, I think, some interesting comments Jay had for Claire, like middle of the road is basically liberalism. So that's a really interesting comment because, first of all, Islam or Prophet Muhammad teaches that his religion is the middle way, but it does seem extreme for the modern belief system in the West, which is do anything you want, which is not really middle of the way. Exactly. It's kind of like extreme. Okay. Extreme, whatever you want to call it.
That is more satanic, really, because that's like a lot of people don't understand what freedom is, and freedom, sorry to interject, Khaled, but responsibility is a large part of freedom. I actually used to have this discussion with my ex-boyfriend. The more responsibility you have, the more free you actually are. Like, because when you follow, like you and I follow, certain principles, like for example, praying or whatever, doing certain duties, doing something as simple as, going and pouring water on the ground or whatever. These responsibilities give you more freedom and make your spirit feel more free. But when you're told you can do whatever you want, that actually makes you feel more trapped, because if you want to do whatever you want, then you're running based on your hedonistic impulses, such as that's where you start drinking or sleeping around or doing lots of drugs. And actually that makes you feel less free. It makes you feel more trapped. So, I think it's quite ironic that true freedom comes with responsibility and structure, and you actually feel less free when you have no responsibility, no structure, which is one of the biggest problems of liberalism. It's this whole thing of do whatever you want as long as you're like, I agree with the principle of as long as you're not hurting anyone, but the problem is that you end up hurting yourself. Like, for example, a lot of these, sorry to go off tangent, but a lot of these transgender kids, for example, they think, oh, I can do whatever I want, I'm not hurting anyone. You're hurting yourself. And actually it's almost like a form of self-harm. It's like if I sit in my room cutting myself, I'm not hurting anyone, but I am hurting myself, and I'm also hurting those who care about me. And that's really the biggest problem with liberalism.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, whatever you're saying, basically, I would say as well, right? So it's not really a
Yeah.
tangent for me. And just to support, like, this idea of, for the modern West, they think freedom is everything. But they don't really understand, like, this is psychology kind of stuff that I was talking about. Like, if you talk about the fathers of happiness, like who teach the fundamentals of happiness, people like Viktor Frankl, they'd say, just to summarize your whole thing in this almost a sentence or something, he says, I wish alongside the Statue of Liberty was a statue of responsibility. I'm not sure if I'm exactly phrasing it, but it's through responsibility that you find happiness, you know. And people say, responsibility, that sounds like a chore, like doing the dishes or something. Why would that make you happy? But actually, you see the problem with kind of modern liberalism, it just excites your surface level emotions, and to really have long-term happiness you have to reflect a little bit, like, why would I need responsibility? It's like, well, let's think about purpose. What does that mean? It's like, you've chosen a direction, you feel that's important. That's basically responsibility. So maybe we need to sell that to the West a bit more in a better way so they can accept it, so it sounds more exciting, because I think it is really exciting, this idea of responsibility. And just to add on to this thing, that I find it funny, Jay, that, and Jay's really nice, by the way. He loves coming on my show, but when you're on the keyboard, you're always summarizing and stuff like that. And it might sound like he just hates, but I think he's basically trying to do me a favor by putting the strongest anti-Islam, whatever point of view. Well, I'm not saying he disagrees with what he's saying, but he's trying to give a very specific angle. So it's funny that Jay is a Christian, because that's the most watered down religion there is at the moment. And I encourage people to become better Christians based on the real teachings of Judaism, or Jesus, or whatever you want to call it, right? Because, like, be married. Jay, get married, for example, right? So we've talked about this. And so it's funny that he very wisely says that, this middle of the road, he calls it middle of the road, but I think I call it watered down way of thinking, doesn't help you. You need clear things, like, why do people buy self-help books? Because they want direction. They don't want a self-help book that says do anything you want. That would be rubbish, right? So people do want direction, but they don't realize it, because we've been fed this idea that you want freedom. And I say you've been fed through a lot
It's
of
like an
movies.
inversion of what freedom actually means. Real freedom
Mm.
is responsibility, but what we've been sold is this very inverted version of freedom.
Yeah, we've been sold it. And I mean, there's Footloose. So they've remade this movie called have you seen the movie? Do you know it?
I know the song.
But it's about dancing, though. Oh, is it a song as well? Okay, yeah. And the reason why that made me, because it was kind of like a 90s, 70s movie or something, and I could see the beginning of the propaganda, and it's all about you'd be so happy once you can be a teenager and just dance. And it was like, really? But you could see that's where the propaganda began. They remade that movie as well.
Most
But
teenagers are depressed. I found being a teenager the most depressing part of my life.
that's really interesting, actually. I kind of feel that as well. I've never thought about it that way, because I was like trying
Well, you
to
don't have any
find direction.
responsibility as a teenager, do you? Your
Yeah,
life
I
is
feel like I'm
all
just
over
getting
the place.
happier all the time. Yeah, because now I'm finding my direction and stuff. Yeah, it's interesting. So even though I had freedom to do anything, I'm not sure. I don't know. Anyway, because I did a lot of cool things as well, I suppose, that were meaningful. So that's a whole different story. And I'm going to get to, I've talked a lot, so I'm going to try to finish it off with the end of I think the most valuable, pertinent part of what Jay said to me, which is, what are the benefits of Islam, Khalid, right? And basically, the short answer is, all my live streams are on that, like relationships, everything. And you can see the benefits, because if you look at the fastest growing religion, I'm going to focus on the population, not the convert side. Like that, the fact that Muslims are having the most children around the world is a statistical way of saying this is not theoretical. Muslim families last, and they last intergenerational in an intergenerational way. They keep having more and more children. So, and that's what you want, Jay. Like, I'm giving an answer that's very specific to you because you don't have kids, you don't have family, because you're Christian, you're following a watered down version of religion, and you need Islam. You know it. You're asking a question you know the answer to, as Claire, I think, said. Really, you've been told the answers, but you don't want to listen. But that's because we're humans. We're
Can I ask
emotional.
quickly, Khaled, would you say
Yes.
that real Christianity, when actually followed in its positive form, is not all that dissimilar to Islam?
100%. Muslims say Jesus was a Muslim. So, and he basically did. People don't realize what did Jesus do? Fast. He actually prayed by putting his head on the ground. He only believed in one God. It was only some other guy called Paul who said, "I had a vision." Not Paul Williams, by the way, I mentioned earlier. It's just some other guy. I had a vision, and Jesus told me everything he said when he was alive was completely wrong, and do the exact opposite. He didn't, I'm paraphrasing, but literally that's what it was. Like, there's three gods. He said, don't follow the law. That's, it's a curse. And Jesus literally said, you have to follow the law. That's the only way to get to heaven, sort of thing. So it's like, that's what modern Christianity is. The opposite. It's kind of, I would call it anti-Christian. It's anti-Christianity. And actually Muslims call my understanding of the Antichrist, or basically what people know as the Antichrist, according to the Quran, is the Christian nations, because they actually are anti-Christian. So that's maybe a bit of a sidetrack. Yeah. So, yep. Okay. So we've been answering a couple of Jay's questions. Maybe he's gone by now. Is he still here? I don't know. He's still here. Why would any Muslim? Okay. I mean, we'll go. It's been 43 minutes, so it's only fair we go to your uncle's questions and comments.
He asked that support the Abrahamic religions. Well, it's interesting because my key criticism of the, we'll say, negative aspects of the Abrahamic religions is that they don't respect goddesses. And obviously, as someone who, well, claims to be here serving a goddess, interpret that as you will. For me, the goddesses are such an important part of religion because with the goddesses, first of all, this reverence for the feminine, and this is something I talked about with a brother named Smalty Jana, about the reverence for the goddesses, because as we all know, yes, there is only one God, and the way I view God is everything. God is a supreme oneness. God is, for me, like, even this video, for me, this is an act, this is a part of God. Like, whenever I watch movies or read stories, for me, I'm seeing aspects. I see the divine in everything and everywhere I look, for me. And I've never, the way I perceive God, I never really think of God as being a creator as such. I always think as God as the total sum of everything, and God as, oneness, balance, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the goddesses, those kind of comments are very insulting to me. The goddesses, like, for example, you look at, say, goddesses like, Mother Bastet or Saraswati, Isis, Freya, like, what the goddesses represent to me are higher beings who were created by God to help lead and guide humanity. And the reason why goddesses are important is because these are very, very ancient, powerful beings. And the thing is that I think a lot of people misunderstand what idolatry is. Like, idolatry is when you say something. Idolatry is when you worship something other than God. We all worship God. We all worship one God. But that doesn't mean, like, goddesses are not above God. Goddesses are goddesses. But we worship goddesses because they give us knowledge. And, there's something as well known as like benevolent beings or whatever, like spirits or angels. These beings can actually help us to connect to the divine, because we're here as mortals, right? We're here living as mortals. And when we worship, well, not worship, but say when we revere or connect to, other beings like spirits, goddesses, etc., what they actually do is they can help us bring us closer to the divine, because the divine is so abstract that it can only really be by connecting to these other beings, we can actually start to really see what's going on and see outside this matrix that we're all living in. And that's what I really think. So that's why for me, praying to a goddess is so important. It helps to give me a lot of clarity. And I think that, there were times, especially in the old days or even now, what people used to do, they used to commit these like quite dangerous sacrifices where they used to like kill animals or kill people and like sacrifice this to the goddesses. And maybe that's why some people said because you're not supposed to do that, like murder, we're not
But
supposed to
I want to focus on like the main thing. So I see you. I can see like, okay, you like your particular understanding of God, which is a goddess and whatever, and it helps you. But just to summarize your point, focused on the two sort of areas that we're covering, like why multiculturalism doesn't work and why is nationalism, especially the Geert Wilder European version of nationalism, becoming popular. I have a feeling they're linked. How does what you're saying link to that in summary? And then I'm going to jump to Stephen, who's just joined in, and then we'll come back to you, Claire. But Stephen hasn't said anything, and we're running out of time, so that's why. So, do you want to summarize your point of view, if in any way you can, or you can leave it at that if you want, about the whole topic?
Yeah, I don't know how that links, but well, regarding that, I mean, yeah, I think just to reiterate back to what I was saying is that every society functions best when it's cohesive, and that's usually why as well. Like people usually with the tribe, people usually have like one goddess of their tribe or one deity of their tribe, and that sort of is the one that like the family deity that everyone prays to. And it's this whole thing of almost like, I guess, having almost like one leader, and it's like that's the one you kind of defer to or whatever, and then that helps to influence the collective, I guess. But yeah, I think that things get really confusing when you start trying to mix everything up, and when you start trying to say, oh, you can pray to like 5 or 6 different goddesses, or you can, I don't know, like have people of all different beliefs all living together. It really does see maybe the difference between the sort of idea of, everything being one and everything being structured and ordered versus everything being all over the place. And it's the all over the placeness that really starts to confuse people and make people kind of lose their way to kind of going down the kind of straight and narrow, I guess.
Cool. Okay. So people need direction, and religion does that, or some sort of direction is good. Stephen, thanks for accepting my invite. I want to hear from
Khaled.
you. Yeah.
Sorry,
we
I'm
had
late.
Oh, that's cool. I appreciate you being here, and hopefully you'll come more often. So
Cool.
maybe I want to hear from your point of view, and then we'll do an introduction, just like we did with everybody else. And there's two kind of areas we're covering, because I think they're maybe both two sides of the same coin, which is one is you don't have to agree with the statement, but why does multiculturalism doesn't work? Why does multiculturalism not work? And then is there a link with the popularity of nationalism in Europe, the kind maybe of Geert Wilders, which includes a lot of Islamophobia? And then I've left a comment as well. Oh, that's your uncle responding. Anyway, we'll leave that there as well. I would kind of like, if Islam is so great and you can be as you can be as Islamophobic as you want if that's your thing. Like somebody's saying like, you don't need Islam's not the answer, which is what I've suggested. But anyway, said a lot of stuff. Let you speak. What do you want to say, Jay? Stephen?
So, Claire knows me. You heard some of my views the other day, Khaled. I guess any of your audience who sees this won't have heard of me before, but I'm just a young white kid in the United Kingdom here. And look, does multiculturalism work? I don't see any great evidence of it. I think there's lots of reasons to say it doesn't. There's lots of reasons as a white person to say why it doesn't work. And this is mainly due to us feeling that we're no longer ascendant in our own nations. Okay, so I can fully appreciate that to somebody who isn't white native, even to somebody who's been here a long time, who's from a generation of immigrants, but isn't like of the white native stock, who doesn't see their kind going downhill, that they might think, oh, it's great, it's okay, or it's not a problem even, or is just apathetic to it. But to me, to somebody who sees the people who look like me going, becoming ever less represented in government, in public offices, in local offices, on the television, in adverts, in every aspect of society, coupled with the fact that since, say, around 2015, 2016, there has been a distinct anti-white agenda. Then what followed in, like, was it 2020 or whatever, the BLM riots and everything. We feel like we are really on the back foot here. And I expressed to you, Khalid, the fear that many white people have that things are only going one direction, and that the people who are becoming ascendant in our countries, who are demographically going to outnumber us in the future, hold historical grievances against us, and that when we're a minority, those grievances could really be taken out upon us, just like we saw a glimpse of in the BLM riots, where all the angst, all the aggression was to us, to our history, to our symbols.
I'm just interested.
Yeah,
I think,
go
are
ahead.
there a lot of white people I think there were a lot of white people in the BLM riots, right? And I'm not saying that's an argument against you. I think there's a lot of white people who are racist against white people.
Oh,
There's a lot of
absolutely. Yeah,
there's a
there
lot of
are.
white
Sorry, can I just
shitlibs, as I
interject
call
as
them.
well? I completely feel what you're saying, brother, and I also think that this is also why multiculturalism is dangerous, because it's almost like the destruction of the indigenous population, because really the UK
Yes.
should be for the white indigenous English. And that doesn't mean that all the non-white people should leave. No, I don't think that we should just kick out all the non-white people. It just simply means that this country, this land, prioritizes the indigenous population, meaning that the indigenous population should be the ones who are in office, should be the ones who are making the decisions, and other people who live here are living here, yes, living here as, you could almost say as guests or whatever, but you're still part of a country, but you must adhere to the main culture. And that's really what I was said at the start of this video. It's almost less about what color your skin is and more about the fact that this culture must be for the main indigenous population, and other people who want to live here, you come and you assimilate into the culture. If you want to bring other things, it's like, if this is my house, if somebody comes over and brings a flower, they're making the house better, but they do not come and start changing my whole house. So that's really what we should be emphasizing. It's that every country needs a unified, cohesive culture, and that can only be achieved through the prioritization of the indigenous population and its clan.
Cool.
Absolutely. I mean, people came here for this culture, for the products of this culture. What we built up. It was an attractive thing. It still is. And many of the institutions and everything are still in place. The question I brought up on the last stream, Khalid, which your audience might not have heard now, is can this country and other Western countries, can we hold on to these institutions, to the culture that we had, or that we in some parts still have? Can the fruits of the civilization be maintained if all we do is import other cultures until ours has been diluted, until it's just like a remnant of the people who built it up in the first place? And I do think that this is a real danger. Now, I don't want to blame any of the people who come here. I don't think you can blame them, and I don't think you can blame them for when they get here having children or wanting to bring their dependents with them, and then them reproducing and growing families, and this is just like a natural product of this. But the end game is the same regardless, and it means that we're going to be in a small minority, and the future it looks very
I'm only
uncertain.
laughing because you sound so despondent, and
Yeah.
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh at that. It's not funny. But anyway, I want
No, that's
you,
cool.
you know, us brown people, us darker people here in the chat, we're so politically incorrect, and I'm trying to encourage you to be really politically incorrect. So just to, and you've only
You can
got a
get
few
away with
minutes.
it.
Yeah, that's what David said.
Yeah.
But to give you to push you into political incorrectness, and I think people want to hear this, like what do you think about Islamophobia? Because that seems to be kind of the staple of the popular nationalism of Geert Wilders and co. Like that you suggested, you know, all these other ideas that are taking over from whatever ideas Britishness was or is. I don't know. I'm not going to go into because I'm going to let Claire say. But if you could summarize, what do you feel about Islamophobia? Could be Islamophobic here. You're welcome. Go for it, James. Not James. I keep calling you James. Stephen. Go on.
Yeah. So look, anti-jihad, counter-jihad, or whatever was a more polite face to get around the arguing against demographic replacement. Basically, that was the main thrust of it. The big taboo that you can't do, mainly for legal reasons, fear of prosecution, is arguing racial politics in the UK. And so, for a time, it was possible to argue against Islam because Islam is an idea, and Islam represents essentially brown people. That's how it's seen by the demographic of white people in the UK who are dissident. And so Islam is a proxy for the demographic question. And so if you
I
argue
don't think
against
that's what
Islam,
Islam is supposed to be, but
no, but it's a
No, but
proxy
he's
for
saying from the.
dissidents.
But you're saying
Yeah.
you said you're from your perspective or white people's perspective, or the. I think you said perspective, which meant that it's not really. You realize it's not really for just brown people. I think that's what you said. I don't know.
No, but it's a proxy. It's a more acceptable proxy because you can't go around and say I'm white, you're brown, and so I'm against you. In the UK, the laws prohibit that. You'll get done for racial hatred. But to a certain extent, you can say I'm afraid of Islam. I'm afraid of Islam taking over. Plus, it's an expansionist. It's a conquering like religion and political ideology at the same time. And so it does feel threatening. I'll admit it. It does feel threatening. Claire Core calls
a
that
lot of white
Islamophobia.
English males feel the same way as you, so.
Yeah, and I'm
the
encouraging
reason,
you to
if
let
I
it
could just
out, and then
say,
over many streams we will kind of unpack that. And I'm not
sure,
going to
I'll just
exactly.
say why
Yeah,
it's
go on.
threatening.
Go on. Yeah.
It's threatening because they're unapologetic about it, and they will espouse it. They've taken over like Speaker's Corner. They're very vibrant in their views. They're very expressive. They don't hide it. And like you say, you acknowledge Christianity doesn't have that anymore. You used to have on every street corner preachers saying, "Look, the end of the world is nigh, and Jesus will Jesus will wash your sins away. You just need to accept him." And they'd be shouting in the streets, in town centres. You don't get that anymore, but you do get Muslims being very, very proud of themselves and unabashed about it. So that's why.
Cool. And I'm not really.
Yeah.
Go on. I'm not really going to respond to all that because we're running out of time, and I do like to stick to my 1 hour thing. It's a principle of consistency. So if we'd had million-hour sessions, we wouldn't be consistent. It would be hard to be anyway. So I'm gonna, since I cut off Claire, you're gonna have the last statement. You can say whatever you want. Go for it. Oh, Claire, you're still there, right? Go on.
Yes, I am. I was muted. So I would say, in defence of Stephen's views, that it's understandable if you don't understand the situation why you would feel that your government hates you. And actually, your government does hate you, and it has been my position that the matriarchy hates white men. And the women, even though they don't consciously know this or state this, they hate white men for not marrying them, for pumping and dumping them, for sounding.
Did you say pumping and dumping? Can you explain that?
Well, we know that the biggest group of white converts in this country were white working class women. So these smart white working
Converts
class
to
women,
Islam.
yes,
Yeah.
they worked, and obviously they would be living amongst immigrants because the working classes would, have been a large number of immigrants in their areas, in Bradford and other places like that in the Midlands and the North. And these white working class women decided that they didn't want to be a pumped and dumped, unmarried mother with variously fathered children, illegitimate offspring, and they thought, well, the only people who would marry us and be grateful for marrying us would be the Muslim men who live amongst us. And that's why they chose to convert. And they even want to use a niqab because they don't want their former, white friends saying, oi, Sharon, fancy a bevy, on Friday after we finish the week or something like that. So, they are the ones. These women who worked out that they won't be going to university to find a nice boyfriend to marry or find a nice boss to have sex with, after they start their careers, they voted with their feet and they voted to convert to Islam. And this is something that white men have to recognize because, yes, they say, oh, we can't say anything because we're going to get called all kinds of names. And I think it is true that Muslims get a degree of protection because it's like, oh, well, the law says we have to protect all these, different religions. And actually, even if you're Christian, you don't get any protection because Christians are, routinely rounded up for saying, well, the Bible doesn't approve of sodomy and, all that kind of thing. But Muslims also complain that, Jews seem to have more protection than they do. But the point is, if you don't have a religion, you can't use your religious group as protection against the government. And Stephen says that he should still have more of a right than the immigrants have just come in. But the immigrants in law actually have formal protection against being discriminated against, and Christianity doesn't protect you, and therefore unfortunately only Islam would protect you, and obviously if you want to marry quickly, you convert to Islam. You keep going to the mosque; they'll set you up with a nice I don't know about nice, but they unmarried people of the opposite sex who might be open to an offer of marriage, and that is the quickest way of doing it. And what is the problem of keeping the white race intact but using a different religion? Because actually, I've been saying for quite a while now that Christianity has been failing since the wars of the Reformation, and they've been denying it all this time. They've been trying to replace Christianity with liberalism and communism and socialism and national socialism and fascism, and it hasn't worked. So, I mean, I think now is the time. The end.
You know what? I'm gonna lie. I'm gonna do. Can we do? I think a fairer way to end things is do like everybody say their 1 minute piece if they can. 1 minute is incredibly impossible thing to do, but so I'll go clockwise. I'll just say I'm first, just because there's something I wanted to say that clear and before I forget. I'll say it in 1 minute. Let's go. All right. So first of all, the thing I wanted to say to Stephen especially, I felt so sorry for you, Stephen, last time. It's like this despondency and stuff, and as if there's a kind of also a clash between groups and different people, as if the immigrants are against you. This is what I'm going to say in one thing: love for all, hatred for none. I see you as my little brother. You're probably a bit younger than me. And Islam generally is always supporting the people who feel downtrodden and stuff like that, and they're seen as the foundations of society. So it's not healthy for anybody to be unhappy. And I'm going to repeat. I'm going to be really racist. I like being racist, right? Something that Claire said, right? As a white man with all those brown Muslim women, they'll be queuing up for you. Just become a Muslim. You'll get married. That's my quick thing. I was actually thinking about that before. So that's what I'll say for now.
Okay.
And multiculturalism, especially Islam, solves so many so many problems that I haven't even got around to mentioning. So do check out the description where I put the summary of the ideas that I didn't even get around to explaining. Your turn, Zarina. Your 1 minute or so, if you can.
Well, as someone who has definitely witnessed the what you're saying, Stephen, is very, very common among other white English males. I've heard it, and I completely and utterly sympathize with it, and I really, really, truly understand, and really, really, truly believe that yes, this country does belong to the white English male. You know, feminism has been a horrible, horrible stain on the white English male. I'm going to substitute the word Islam with the word God. I believe that finding God is what is going to save this nation. And when you actually find God the right way, in an actual healthy way, that is what really is going to help hold the UK together. You know, a strong love of God, a strong love of its people, a strong priority of its native English people, without, you know, being cruel to the non-English people. And I really think that can only really be achieved with religion, but it has to be religion used as a force for good.
Cool. Claire?
But sorry, what am I supposed to be saying? I'm posting this.
Oh, your 1 minute summary. I'm just going to say while you're thinking about it, guys, don't be nasty. Some nasty comments. I don't like banning people. Go on. In the chat, I was talking about.
I think religion is cognitive behavioral therapy, and it just means that, you know, if you attribute your suffering as something that is telling you something to learn a lesson, then maybe you won't learn your lesson. Maybe you won't suffer so much, and you will instead be concentrating on what did I do wrong, how can it be solved, and more constructive things like you know, going to find other people who hate the same people as you, and then getting yourself into trouble over hate speech and hating the people that you were originally hated, you know, even more, because it's a kind of confirmation bias. So if you think change your, I mean, there is a verse in the Quran that actually says God does not change the lot of those who do not change what is in their hearts. The end.
Cool. Stephen, 1 minute if you can, or two probably.
Yeah. Look, Kelly, I saw you laughing when Zarina there said you just need God. And
No, I was laughing at the very rude comments in the chat.
I thought you were laughing,
I
thinking,
dare
oh,
you
no,
to ban me and stuff
just
like
like
that.
this.
And yeah.
Alright.
Go on.
I thought you were laughing at this idea that we just need like this idea of God, and then God will save us. And I think yours and Claire's elevator pitch is much different. It's no, Islam is the solution, because Islam has this framework, and Islam is also a political solution, effectively, or it comes with certain political givens. But the problem is that we see Islam pitched against us in many ways. Okay, it seems an external force. It doesn't seem like there could be a negotiation. It seems like one is the group, is the ideology of the other, and that it's growing externally. Also, it is represented en masse largely by brown faces. Okay, and so it is against us just visually, aesthetically, you could say. And I'm not saying I just dislike seeing brown faces, but what I'm saying is it's an ideology that is brought in by the foreigner, and so it is naturally pitched against us. Although Claire puts it like a wonderful elevator pitch: go to a mosque and get, you know, you'll get a wife, and Islam will then like indoctrinate your children to also get wives and reproduce and have monogamous marriages, and this is the solution for you. It feels like we'd be giving up everything that is us, our traditions, our the sense of who we are. And so it just feels like it's just a no-brainer. That's not the solution for us. We have to find a solution from within ourselves, within our own tradition, within our own history, or I know we're going to be snuffed out, I guess. But the bigger question is, going forward, is If we import the third world here, for how long will this country maintain itself? If you transfer the population of, say, I don't know, Cambodia into Japan, would Japan still remain Japan for very long?
I
Or
don't
would
think anybody
that-
here on this stream wants to see the English wiped out, and I certainly don't think anybody here wants to see the English lose their native traditions or their native ancestral beliefs. I don't think that's what anybody here on this stream is advocating.
No, I don't. I actually want. I think all the brown
No, it's
people
not
want to
being
move back
wiped
to warm countries eventually.
Yeah, it's not about being wiped out. It's just about the trend that we can see happening. And I once shared a demographic pyramid that's like inverse with Claire, which we have to look at the demographics of the youngest generation, like the generation Alpha and the kids being born now. Because it's okay to look at it, look at the faces on the streets now and say, like, it's not that bad. But we know that it's baked into the cake by the youngest generation. And what that means is that there's no turning back from it. We are on track to be less than 50% of the population by something like, conservative estimates say 2060. But it could be a lot less than that. And then we're already under half of the population, and it's a concern to people like me, and that's all I'd say, Callum. We can talk about it in the future more.
Looking forward to loads more conversations, guys. All very interesting. Too tempting to continue forever. I'm gonna go. Otherwise, I'll never ever have a life outside live streams. But very good
Into
talking
a
to you
7 hour,
always.
12-hour, 24-hour stream, Khalid.
Not quite like
How
you,
long
Claire.
Claire Core can do an after show.
Yeah, she could. All right, bye, guys. I gotta go. Fantastic talking to you guys. Bye. Thank you very
All right,
much,
thanks for
chat
having me.
people, as well. Bye.